Hello and welcome. Well, earlier this year, J.K. Rowling got a tweet which said, "My dream is to be a writer, but my parents always say that this is not a worthy profession. What do I do to change this?" In typical Rowling candor, she replied, "Do what I did. Pretend you want to do something else and write on the sly until you're free to do whatever you want." Well, that might not be the case for everyone, but it shows that in so many parts of the world, writing still doesn't cut it, especially as a profession. What about India's young? Like I was just speaking to my panel and delighted to see that they were actually in agreement. The shelves in bookshops that have Indian writing just seem to be expanding. Is that really connected to Indians reading Indian writers anymore? What about the demand for Indian writing in the market? And who are the Indian writers who are being talked about or who are publishing their work that is being read? Well, that's what we are looking at today. A very special panel with me. I'd like to start by introducing Anushka Ravishankar. She's a publisher at Duckbill Books, and some of her books, including Catch the Crocodile, have been inspired by real life events. Also a disclaimer, she's also my daughter's favorite. Also with us on the panel, Amitabh Bagchi, very well known novelist. In fact, his book Above Average is a story about a young boy as he makes his way up the academic ladder. That's one that most people here at work seem to have read as well. With me also Satyarth Nayak. He's a crime writer, and we are also joined by Sharanya Deepak, who's written a book by the name of Vampire Boy. Thanks all so much for taking our time to speak to us. Amitabh Bagchi, let me start by asking you, when you look around you, do you see that there are enough youngsters who want to take to writing, and importantly enough their family that's going to encourage them or say it's okay as a hobby, but that's what it should remain?
Well, I think that there is certainly an increasing number. Compared to 10 years or 15 years ago, the number has increased tremendously. And I think that we are moving into a different time where there's a culture of celebrity in our country, which was not so much there 10, 15 years ago. And so, some of these parents probably are thinking of it in the same way as parents of kids who are going on, I don't know, Saregama Kids are seeing it, that, maybe this is a moment of fame and fortune. Of course, they don't realize that there's a lot of toil and struggle and so on. Of course, I'm sure. I'm sure it's the same for people on Saregama Kids.
Right, yeah. Sharanya, give us a sense of what it's been like for you. How much of this sort of desire to be in this celebrity mode do you see of people around you? This is not necessarily your own example that I'm talking about. And how much of it is sort of a desire to write and want to tell the stories that you perhaps have in your head somewhere or somewhere deep inside you?
Personally, I haven't seen so much of the desire to be an artistic celebrity. But I think my background is very subjective because I went to this really sort of liberal middle class school, and essentially if you want to be a writer, you don't want to be a celebrity writer, but you want to be someone who gets famous later, something like that. Like you want to be a bit underground. Right. That was the whole idea that I grew up with.
So I love the liberal middle class because that's, on a completely different note, that's exactly what sort of doesn't sit quite well these days, but anyway, carry on.
Yeah, but so when I was growing up, we didn't want to, no one wanted to be, for example, Paulo Coelho, but we wanted to be Jack Kerouac, that's the difference.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but tell me very quickly, this is what you do. You are now a full-time
I don't say it.
Writer. But is that sort of, how do you sort of see yourself? This is not something that you're doing alongside something else. Is this whole and soul?
I don't make any money off it. So essentially my parents have just cut me off about a year ago. So I do work.
Okay, sure.
So
that would really be the reality for so many out there, right? Because it's difficult to sort of, especially in the beginning, till you sort of, make a name for yourself, or, whatever you churn out will still have people picking it up and at least reading it and then reacting. Until then, it is going to be like this, and anywhere in the world. It's not really unique to India, is it?
Yeah, it's true everywhere. And in fact, in children's writing, even after you've made a name for yourself, such as this, it's not easy to make a living out of just writing.
Right.
It's still, children are still reading the foreign books much more than the Indian books. So you go into a bookshop, and especially a children's bookshop, and you look for the Indian children's books, and it'll be tucked away in the darkest corner of the bookshop.
Is the story different, Amitabh, when we sort of talk about Indian adult writing? When I say sort of adult, I just mean more grown-up writing. Is the story different there? Because there's still so much sort of like, there's still sort of angst over, we're not reading enough, why are we not reading enough, when are we going to read, get off your gadgets and your social media and read.
I think in the adult book section or fiction specifically, I can speak a little bit of, there's a three-way split in the production. On the one hand, you have writers of commercial and popular fiction, some of whom are extremely successful in terms of the number of copies they sell. On the other hand, on the literary side, you have world famous authors, many of whom are not from India, I mean don't live in India per se or of Indian origin. They have some amount of success in terms of number of copies, although their success doesn't compare to the number of copies sold by you know, Ravi Subramaniam, Chetan Bhagat and others such. And then there are some of us in the middle, you know, who are writing. Yeah, so because we aren't necessarily celebrities in the way, say, an Amitav Ghosh is a celebrity or Vikram Seth is a celebrity, and nor are we writing the kind of stuff that you know, that sells easily and is easily accessible.
The airport reading.
The airport novel. So we have some trouble in trying to create a readership, and the numbers of copies that books like these sell are kind of low.
So what would you say to, say, a Siddharth or a Sharanya who's sort of saying initially sort of we're still struggling to find our feet perhaps, and so, you know, money is an issue, so you can only do this alongside, not really devote your whole and soul to it.
See, look, I'm not going to you know, preach to anyone. I think every writer should write what comes naturally to them and what they enjoy doing, right? And whether it's commercial or it's literary or whatever, that is something that as an individual you have to make a decision of what you're going to write. And maybe you guys should give us some more space to put that message across, right?
The fact that we're doing this, I think maybe that we are on the right path. But tell me, how did you get into writing? Like, when did the penny drop that this is what you wanted to do?
I was actually a journalist, so I just had some kind of an epiphany that I have to do something different, not writing per se, but something different. And I was just rereading Dan Brown. You know, I call my book a freak act of nature because I was rereading Dan Brown one fine day, and I had this very random curiosity to know if there's something interesting in our own Indian history and culture, something that we can call esoteric, that royal secret that he talks about so wonderfully. So a very random search on the internet, and nothing because I want to write a book, just to know. And this wonderful legend pops up from some obscure websites. Extremely fascinating, one of our most celebrated Indian Indian emperors, and what he did 2,000 years back, and I was like, this is mesmerizing, this has to be a story that I should tell. And that's when the whole thing started, that okay, I have to sit down and now write this book. So that's how it started, the journey started then and there.
A writer should essentially write what he or she wants to write, a story that perhaps they want to tell.
Yeah.
Does that really happen? In the sense that, is it dictated to you, or sort of do you have to sort of, at the back of your mind, are you sort of worried about, will this really work, or, you know, am I going to like tweak it to what I believe they would like to read, as opposed to this is what I would like to say?
To be honest, no, I never think about, I mean, I never have. I've written one book and it's 70 pages long, and it's, and I'm trying to write my second now, but with Anushka and Shayani, it was never something I was doing. I mean, I knew I was writing for kids, but it was never something I was doing. It was mostly for myself. I think that's how they put it across to me. And I was 21 when I started writing it, and I was 22 when I finished. But I think maybe this is too naive and idealistic. Maybe it will change.
Maybe it will do. But I'll take that back to Amitav. Amitav, you've said once that just like writers in other times had to accept the whims and the vagaries of their royal patrons, we have to accept the idiosyncrasies of our patron. Explain to us how that affects your writing.
See, look, the patronage comes from the market today, and this is not new. It has been the case for 150 years, maybe 100 years or so in India and longer in other places. So one has to make a decision. I think the main thing is one has to make a decision of, which comes back to the previous question, of what one wants to do, and then accept how far that can go in a scenario dominated by the market as a patron rather than as a connoisseur, as a patron.
Right, Anushka, you've heard that. Now, how much of that really plays out for children's writing when we talk about patronage? Because one does see, like we discussed earlier, one does see a lot more out there and some really terrific stuff.
Yeah, things have certainly changed over 20 years. Like when my daughter was young, I couldn't find good Indian books for her. And now it's very different because you go into a bookshop and there's a lot of young writers writing really unusual and fresh stuff, and that's lovely to see. But of course there's a balance to be, as publishers, there is a balance we maintain between publishing wacky fun stuff that we want out there and the things that the parents want and teachers want. It is changing. I mean, you do have because the reading parents want their children to read books and enjoy them, you know.
Exactly. Right.
And unless you have books that are fun to read, how are children going to get into reading at all?
Right. And read, when we say read, I hope that we still be, I mean, I'm assuming that we still mean the old-fashioned book, right? Like
Yes,
the flip
absolutely.
pages, turn
Yeah.
the pages, and dog-ear the pages, and that's what you read. I'm going to take a quick break, but before that, I want to ask the two of you. I mean, I know that this is what you're doing full-time. You're doing something alongside just because you need something to pay the bills, I understand. But I want to ask you both before we take a break. Do you have to consciously think about like a what if, like a plan B? Does that play on your mind, or?
It does, it does. I mean, I would be lying if I said it doesn't play out,
Yeah.
but of course. But I think, you know, so far since the journey has been good, the book's done really well. And, you know, talking about pressure also, since we were talking about that in the earlier part, I think when you start to write, there's no pressure. It's when your book does well and now you're writing a second one, then the pressure starts coming in. You're hearing that I can't probably go for a different genre. I'm told to stick to my genre because you've been tested in that and it's done well. So those stuff do come in. That bit comes in so far, but I think so far
That's an important point you make.
Yeah,
because then
yeah.
I think that's a very
It comes in.
different ball game. And that's when you
Exactly.
see many people trip, and
Yeah,
that's true
yeah.
for all walks of life, I
That's
imagine.
true,
But that
absolutely,
does
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Shiranya?
And I don't know, but with me, this is not my job yet, you know, like it's something that I've done and it's something I'm still trying to do. So whenever someone says, oh, you're a writer, come, like for example today, I'm still trying to be a writer. It's not my job. And I was living in Europe.
Do you hope that it will be your job?
Yeah, of course. I mean, eventually. I don't expect it to happen too soon. It's not, I've never thought it was going to be something that makes me money.
And you've not sort of in your head set any timelines that by the time I'm, I don't know, 25, 30, whatever it is, that I should be
I
doing this
plan to
full-time,
start.
or-
So basically, my plan was to grow into like a writer personality by the time I was 25. I honestly didn't think I would publish anything. But
Quickly, I'm going to get Amita and Anushka to quickly respond to that. You know, that when you sort of, by the time I'm whatever, I will be doing this. Yes, I do have a plan B. That doesn't, I mean, it's sort of, those insecurities are par for the course, I imagine.
But you know something, it's nice to see that people are actually thinking in terms of being writers.
Right.
Because when we were young, at least when I was young,
Yeah.
I always wanted to write, but I never thought I would. You know, I never thought of it as a career, as a possible career. Because and that's changed, which
That's
is wonderful
changed.
to see.
That's changed.
Also, see that writing is not just a profession; it's also a calling, and that there's something uplifting about it, and the pursuit of this career should also be a pursuit of that personal upliftment, which will then reflect in the books.
Very quickly, this is one. I promise this is the last bit before we take a break, which is: would you then say that when it comes to being a writer, for instance, either you have it or you don't? Actually, let me just rephrase that. When it comes to writing, either you can do it or you can't. I guess be a writer is a different ballgame altogether. But when you talk about writing, either you can do it or you can't. You can hone your skills and you can sharpen your skills and you can improve your skills. But you either hai ya nahi hai.
That would be a very harsh thing to
I
say.
see. Okay.
For a lot of people, and since I do have a day job and that's a professor, and I'm a professor in my other life, so I would not say that to someone because there would be a lot of young people out there.
Sure.
I think one should always try, aim, but should be also realistic. And at some point, you know, if it's not working out, tell
Then
yourself
say, okay,
that
maybe this
"ठीक है,
wasn't for
चलो,
me."
कोई बात
Well, that's a
नहीं."
great note to end on. We're taking a quick break. Coming back with lots more. Remember, keep your feedback coming in. Back in a moment.